Today we're going to talk about price controls. Price controls are laws to change the price in a market, okay? Laws to change the price in a market. Laws to change the price in a market. Okay. Laws to change the price in the market. So why would we ever want to use a law to change the price in a market? Okay, good. So the most common way we can think of is that the price is perceived as too high, so we'd want to lower it with the law. Okay, so we call this a price ceiling. Okay, price ceiling. Okay, so this is a maximum price. Maximum price. Okay, maximum price. So it's illegal to charge a price higher than the ceiling price, which is lower than the equilibrium price. So we'll see how that looks on our equilibrium graph. So we're going to look at the market for water bottles. Okay, so we'll look at cases of water bottles. Cases of water bottles. So the good's going to be cases of water bottles, right? We can imagine they're sold at, Walmart or wherever it sells water bottles. Okay, so we have supply, demand. Sorry, these should be just normal straight supply and demand curves, but drawing is hard. Okay, then drop a dot. So we have really quantity 1 or QE. Either's fine. We're not going to do shifts on this graph, so we're not going to have 2's of anything, but if you want to do like P1 or PE, that's fine. So this is in equilibrium, right? So we have an equilibrium price, equilibrium quantity. Okay, so let's think about this. So let's say there is expectation of a hurricane. So expect a hurricane. Okay. So if people expect that a hurricane is coming, how is that going to change how much they want water bottles? Okay, they're going to want water bottles more. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that means that, say the price was this before. So we'll say that the price was $4 before. $4 for a case of water bottles. Okay. But then demand increased pretty dramatically, right? So now the price would be $8. Okay. Because people expect a hurricane, right? So they want the water bottles. So the demand goes up dramatically, right? So demand would have been down here, but then increased. Okay. So the price would have gone up. All right. So the old price, before the expectation of the hurricane was $4. Okay, so this is going to be our price ceiling, okay? So this is our PC, okay? This is our ceiling price at $4, okay? So what that says is it's illegal for the sellers to sell at a higher price than $4. Okay? In North Carolina and a few other places, there are laws like this to prevent, or that the law says that the company cannot raise the price during a disaster. Okay, so unless they have some legitimate cost reason why their goods should be more expensive, they can't raise the price of them. Okay, so these sellers have to keep the price of water bottle cases at $4, even though people want those water bottles a lot more than they did before. So let's look at this. Where $4 hits the supply curve, we drop that down. Okay, and we get quantity something. Okay, so everybody think, which quantity do we get from where the price hits the supply curve and we take it down? We get quantity something. Go ahead and type it in the chat. I'll tell you when to send it. Don't send it yet. I'll tell you when to send it. Okay, good. It is quantity supplied. Okay, so this says at $4, the supply curve tells us, oh, okay, this is how many cases of water bottles your sellers are willing to sell, right? This amount. Okay, and then we take our $4 over to the demand curve and we hit the demand curve. Then we take it down and we get a quantity, right? So where $4 hits the demand curve, we get the quantity. Go and type it in the chat. I'll tell you when to send it. Yeah, quantity demanded. Okay, good. So this is the amount buyers want to buy. So at this price, which is much lower than the price should be, right, than the true equilibrium price now, the buyers want to buy a lot more than the sellers want to sell. Okay. So what does that look like in this market? How are people going to act? Okay, so we get a shortage. Okay, All right, good. And so we listed some of the consequences, but we'll list some more. Before we go further, we'll notice something on this graph. Okay, so only this many water bottle cases are available to be sold, but people want to buy this many. That's a problem, right? We got all these disappointed people. Okay, but we're specifically interested in these disappointed people. Okay, so if this market were in equilibrium, if the price had been able to rise to $8, then this would be the number of water bottles bought and sold, this equilibrium quantity, right? But because of the price control, your sellers don't want to sell that many. They want to sell less. And so they're only going to sell this many. And so then all these people who wanted to buy or sell the water bottles at $8 but not at $4 are not going to be able to make a trade, right? So these are all buyers who would, of course, be happy to pay $4, right? But also would be willing to pay $8. But there's no seller who's willing to sell them these quantities at $4, right? The sellers say, no, it's not worth it for us to hustle and make more if we can't sell it for what it's really worth. So, so then what's going to happen is all these trades don't happen that would have happened at equilibrium. Okay, so we'll set that aside for a second and think about this area. Okay, so this big triangle we shaded a couple classes ago because it's a really, really important area, right? We shaded this whole big thing. Okay, so what do we call these areas, right? So there was this bit and then there's this bit. Okay, what did we call those areas? Yeah, so we had consumer surplus. Whoops, sorry. Oh, I shouldn't have shaded on this graph. Sorry, erase it or don't shade it on yours. Oh, it's such a fail. Okay, so this is not shaded. Ignore that, sorry. Okay, all right, so go ahead and erase that if you did, sorry. Okay, so this is not shaded. But all of this area would be producer and consumer surplus, right? So this would all be consumer surplus. Don't shade it on yours, okay? And this would all be producer surplus, right? So all the people who are happy to have made a trade at this price, okay? But only these people, okay, are able to make the trades, okay? All these people are not able to make trades that they would have liked to make, okay? So this is a good place to pull out a different color if you have a different color with you, okay? And shade in, well, I'll show you exactly where to shade in. Okay, so don't shade this in. That's not important, okay? But what we're going to do is we're going to notice, okay, so these are the quantities that they are not, so this quantity here, okay, that quantity, okay, is going to be trades that don't happen. Trades that don't happen. Okay, they would have happened in equilibrium, but they're not happening because the price control is messing up this market, okay? All right, so because these trades don't happen, all the producer and consumer surplus that would have come from these trades doesn't happen, so we're going to shade that in, okay? Actually, sorry, this is where you should do it in a different color. Let me pull out my different color. Okay, so those are all the lost producer and consumer surpluses, so it's just that triangle, okay? The triangle of producer and consumer surplus that would go with these trades, but these trades are not happening, okay? Those trades are not happening. So this consumer and producer surplus is not being captured, okay? And we call that a deadweight loss, okay? So shade that area in a different color, okay? And then drop an arrow down to where you have space to write, okay? It's called a deadweight loss. Deadweight loss, okay? And it's a key term, we're gonna underline it. Okay, deadweight loss, you ready? Deadweight loss, the lost producer and consumer surplus. The lost producer and consumer surplus from trades that aren't happening. The lost producer and consumer surplus from trades that are not happening. Okay. Lost producer and consumer surplus from trades that are not happening. All right, so then let's think about the consequences. So we're going to look at the intended consequence. And we're going to also look at actual consequences. Okay, so the intended consequence. So what was the purpose of this law? Why would a place have a law that makes it illegal for the companies to raise the prices during a disaster? Yeah, okay, it's to make the goods more accessible. Right, make goods more accessible. Excellent. Right. So yeah, it looks really bad for companies to raise the price in this situation, right? It looks like, oh, they're extorting their poor customers who have no choice. That's terrible. Okay, so we could make it illegal for them to raise the price, right? They have to keep the old normal price, even though people want water bottles a lot more. Okay, so let's think about the actual consequences of this. Okay. So how are people going to act differently, right? How are the buyers going to act differently because the price didn't rise? Or how are the sellers going to act differently because the price didn't rise? Okay, cool. So buyers, that low price is going to say to the buyers, buy a lot. It's cheap, right? So low price encourages hoarding. Low price encourages hoarding. Okay. The low price encourages hoarding. Okay. So people who get there to the store first are going to see, wow, the price is really low, right? The price is normal, even though I want water bottles a lot more than I did before. I'm going to buy a bunch, right? And so a person might buy, or family, right, might buy 5 cases of water, right? Because why not, right? The water is extremely cheap given the situation. And so they're going to buy a bunch, right? Because you never know, like maybe their neighbor might want some water, right? Or, they might think, well, okay, well, we could be stuck in our house for 2 weeks. Let's buy a ton of water, right? And so that price, the low price says, buy a lot of water. It's really cheap. And so they do, okay? But then a lot of people won't be able to get the water they want, okay? So empty shelves, right? Empty shelves and disappointed people. Some people can't get water, okay? Some people can't get water. Can't get water. Okay? Empty shelves and some people can't get water. Yeah, so that's pretty terrible, right? Because if you're in this situation, you're worried about the hurricane, you're worried about, if the water line to your house breaks, which happens sometimes in hurricanes, right? Or you might have to evacuate, right? And so you definitely want to have some extra water around, okay? But you can't get any if the shelves are empty, right? If you're one of these people who got there too late, you don't get any. And that's pretty awful. Okay, so then let's think about the sellers and what they're going to do, okay? So we're looking at a very, very short period of time, like a couple of days, right? So the actual production of water bottles could not change in that time, right? Changing production of water bottles takes months. But is there anything that the sellers could do or would want to do if the price were $8 that they wouldn't be willing to do at $4 that could get more water bottle cases onto the shelves? Yeah, okay. So what they're going to do is if the price could rise, then the sellers could make a lot more money selling water bottles, right? We noticed that. And so they're going to hustle and they're going to get more water bottles on the shelf. So for like Walmart, right, they ship water bottles all over the country. So what they could do instead of sending a shipment to, Arkansas, they could redirect that shipment to go to Florida where there's a expected hurricane, right? And it would be worth their trouble to redirect that shipment of water if they could sell it for $8, right? But if it's only $4 normal price, then that's not really appealing, right? Because sending that truck, puts the truck in a little more danger than if they weren't expecting a hurricane, right? So if they can only sell it for normal price, they might as well send that truck to a safe area, right? And not to a place that's expecting a hurricane. But for $8, right? If they can make a ton more money selling those water bottles in this area, then they're going to do that, right? They're going to hustle and get more water bottles onto the shelves. Okay. You could also see people who live nearby, like, a nearby state, go to their Walmart where the price is still normal, buy a ton of water bottles, and then drive over to this area and sell the water bottles out of the back of their car and make a lot of money and bring more water bottles to these people who desperately want them. Okay. So the quantity supplied goes up as the price goes up, and the quantity demanded goes down, okay? So the low price, okay, but as it is, the price can't rise, right? So the low price discourages sellers from getting more. Or from providing more, maybe, okay? Providing more product. Okay, because it's not worth it to them, right? So the low price discourages sellers from providing more product, right? They're going to say, why would we hustle and bring more water here to this dangerous area if we can only sell it for normal price? Okay, so So that's rough, right? Because the low price says to the buyers, oh my gosh, you should buy so much water bottles, right? And don't really think about being careful about how many water bottles you buy, just buy a ton, right? And so then the first people buy it all, and then there are a lot of people who can't get any, and then they're like really desperate and scared in the situation, but there's no water for them, right? And then the low price says to the sellers, don't try to make more, don't hustle, right? Don't get more water bottles on those shelves, okay? But if the price could rise, that solves both problems, right? If the price could rise, then the sellers are gonna hustle and get more water bottles onto the shelves, and the buyers are gonna be more careful about how they buy, right? They're gonna think, okay, water bottles are, twice as expensive as normal, or, cases of water bottles. I'm going to think carefully about how much I want to buy, right? They're going to think, okay, maybe 2 cases is enough for my family for the next couple of days, and that's fine, right? And so they buy 2 cases, right? Instead of, the 5 they would have bought at the low price, okay? So that high price says, think carefully, only buy what's really important to you. And so then people think carefully and they only buy what's important to them, and then that leaves plenty of water left over for other people. Okay, so that means that water is going to be on the shelves when people come. Okay, so it's not a question in these cases of if for a $4 price is better for people than an $8 price. The question is it better to have an $8 price or empty shelves? Okay, because only a few people get the $4 water bottles, and then the rest of people don't get any. Okay, so then let's think about if we achieved our intended consequence, right? If we made this water more accessible by putting this price control on it. Right, so yeah, less accessible, less water available, right? And a lot more people who want it, and they're encouraged to, buy it irresponsibly in a way that hurts other people. Okay, so that's that. Case of water bottles. Okay, so we'll add one more key term here, price gouging. Price gouging. Okay, so price gouging, okay, is when companies raise prices. When companies raise prices during a disaster. Okay, it is extremely unpopular, right? Just the name price gouging sounds pretty scary, right? But yeah, it's a derogatory term, okay? So you might see a journalist, writing about a company raising its prices during a disaster, and say that, and the journalist might write, oh, isn't it so terrible that the companies are raising prices and exploiting these people in this terrible situation in order to make more money? That's terrible, right? That company is price gouging, okay? But economists love price gouging, right? We see that when the price can rise, that makes the goods more available to people who desperately want them. And the higher price encourages people to be, careful about how much they buy and not just buy everything. And so that means there's plenty available for everyone. Okay, so if the price rises, then there's plenty available for everyone. The price is more, but you'll notice in price gouging situations, the price might double or triple, but that doesn't really make a difference in how much people are able to get it, right? So if a person can afford a $4 case of water, they can afford an $8 case of water, okay? So it doesn't make much of a difference as far as like concerns about poor people being able to afford it, which is the main concern. But yeah, the question is really, do we want $8 water or do we want like no water on the shelves? So economists love price gouging, okay? Right, this price ceiling sounds like a great idea, right? Stop the price from rising during a disaster, but it actually has these really awful consequences for the people in this situation. Okay, next example. We're going to do one more price ceiling example, and then we'll do the other kind of price control. This price ceiling, okay, so another price ceiling. Okay. So this one is called rent control. Oh, sorry, that's a little bit out. Boop. Okay, another price ceiling, rent control. Another price ceiling, rent control. Okay, so rent control is a law passed typically for a particular area, okay, that makes it illegal to charge above a certain price for an apartment rent, okay? So in some places, apartments are really expensive. So like in New York City and San Francisco, apartment rents are extremely expensive. And so, a person might look at that situation and be like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. How could a person afford to live in these areas? We got to do something and get this price down. And so an obvious solution is, okay, well, let's just make it illegal for people to charge high prices for the rent. Okay, and so that's a rent control. Okay, so it is illegal to charge above a certain price. Illegal to charge above a certain price. Price for an apartment. Okay. Illegal to charge above a certain price for an apartment. Okay. So we're going to draw an equilibrium graph for apartments in a certain area. Certain area. So these rent controls tend to be pretty localized, tend to be like just for a particular neighborhood or a particular couple of blocks. They're pretty uncommon for reasons we'll talk about. They have some rough consequences. But yeah, there's some of these rent controls in New York City and San Francisco, and then in some European countries they're fairly like somewhat common. Okay. All right. So we have P1, Q1, or you do PE, QE. These are just equilibrium quantities, and we're not going to have a shift, quantities and prices. Okay, so you have apartments in a certain area. So let's say that, this is a block of New York City, and New York City is, really desirable. Lots of people want to live there, and it's kind of hard to build new places. So apartments are really expensive. So let's say the equilibrium market rent would be $4,000 a month, which is a lot of money. But it's New York City, right? And people really want to be there. So $4,000 a month would be the normal equilibrium price, and of course at that price the amount of apartments that are available equals the number of people who want to rent the apartment. Okay, right? Quantity supplied would equal quantity demanded at that price. But let's put a rent control, right? Let's say, okay, this is $4,000 is a lot of money, right? So think about, why would the politicians suggest a price control, right? What are they intending to do with that? So the intended effect, okay, is to make apartments more accessible. Right? Make apartments more accessible. ACCES. Okay, that's close enough. Make apartments more accessible. ACCES. Yeah. Make apartments more accessible, right? So, this is really expensive. We want people to be able to find apartments more affordably, so we're going to make it illegal for them to charge that high rent, okay? So we're going to say it's illegal to charge more than $2,000 a month for an apartment in this area, right? When the true equilibrium price would be $4,000. Okay, so this is our price ceiling. Great, so we'll go ahead and hit the supply curve with this price, take it down, okay? And we get a certain quantity. What quantity is that? Type it in the chat. I'll tell you when to send it. Okay, quantity supplied. Good. So this is the amount the sellers are willing to sell. Okay. And then, or like the number of apartments that exist. Okay. And then at this price, we go to the demand curve, and the demand curve says, okay, at this price, this is the quantity. Type it in the chat. I'll tell you when to send it. Yeah, demanded. Quantity demanded. Okay. Quantity demanded. Okay. So we do have a deadweight loss, just as before. Okay, it's in the same area, right? Of these are the apartments that would be available and would be rented at equilibrium price, but there's actually only this many apartments. So all these people who would have liked to rent or offer an apartment at $4,000 cannot do that, and so all that value is lost. Okay, all those consumer and producer surpluses are lost. Okay, so let's think about the consequences. Okay, so what are the buyers going to do? Like the people who would be interested in renting an apartment, what are they going to do? What are the people who own apartments going to do? Okay, so let's look at the actual effects. Actual effects. Okay. So we have a shortage. Okay. because the price is too low, right? So remember, a shortage only ever happens because the price is too low. Okay? But the price is held too low by the law. The price can't rise. Okay? So we'll think about consequences.